Captain Marcus Chen had seen plenty of derelict ships in his 15 years salvaging the Outer Rim, but nothing quite like this. The vessel hung in space like a crystalline cathedral, its translucent hull catching starlight and bending it into impossible rainbows. The ship's design defied human understanding of physics, with flowing curves that seemed to pulse with their own inner rhythm, even though all power signatures read dead. "Sensors show it's been drifting for at least 3 centuries, reported his second-in-command. Sarah Kim, her voice crackling through the comm system. "No life signs, no energy readings. Whatever civilization built this is long gone." Marcus guided his salvage ship, the Rust Bucket, closer to the alien vessel. His crew of 4 had stumbled across this find purely by accident, while investigating a distress beacon that turned out to be a false alarm. Now floating before them was potentially the archaeological discovery of the century. The ship's surface was covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly, making Marcus's eyes water if he stared too long. "Boss, you seeing this?" Tech specialist Danny Rodriguez called from his station. "The hull material is reading as some kind of biometallic compound. It's organic but stronger than any alloy we've ever seen. This thing could revolutionize ship construction." Marcus nodded, already calculating the potential value. A single sample of that hull material could fund his crew's retirement. But something nagged at him as they approached the docking bay, which had somehow recognized their approach and opened like a blooming flower. The ship's automated systems were responding to their presence, despite showing no power signatures. The docking bay was vast and eerily beautiful, with walls that seemed to glow with their own bioluminescent light. As soon as the Rust Bucket settled onto the organic-looking landing pad, the bay sealed itself and began filling with atmosphere. Marcus watched in amazement as the readings showed the air becoming perfectly breathable for humans. "That's impossible," whispered Elena Vasquez, the crew's engineer. "How does it know our atmospheric requirements? How is it even functioning without power?" Marcus suited up anyway, not trusting alien technology completely, and led his team into the ship's corridors. The interior was even more remarkable than the exterior. The walls curved and flowed like they had been grown rather than built, with veins of soft light running through them like a circulatory system. The air hummed with an almost musical quality, and their footsteps echoed strangely as if the ship itself was listening. They moved through chamber after chamber, each more wondrous than the last. Some rooms contained equipment they couldn't begin to understand, with interfaces that responded to thought rather than touch. Others held what appeared to be artwork, sculptures of impossible beauty that seemed to capture emotions in physical form. The ship felt like a museum, a library, and a home all at once. It was in what appeared to be a medical bay that Marcus heard it, a soft rhythmic sound almost like breathing. He followed the noise to a corner where a crystalline pod sat surrounded by dead monitoring equipment. Inside the pod, barely visible through the frosted surface, was a small figure. Marcus's heart raced as he realized what he was looking at. It was alive, whatever it was. The creature was small, no bigger than a human child, with features that were both alien and strangely familiar. Its skin was pale and translucent, showing the delicate bone structure beneath. 4 arms hung limply at its sides, and its large eyes were closed in what appeared to be deep sleep or unconsciousness. "Sarah, get over here," Marcus called, his voice tight with excitement and concern. "We've got a survivor." Sarah rushed over and immediately began scanning the pod with her medical equipment. Her face went pale as she read the results. "Marcus, this creature is in critical condition. Whatever this pod was supposed to do, it's failing. Life signs are barely registering. And Marcus," she paused, looking up at him with troubled eyes. "According to these readings, it's just a child. A baby, really." Marcus stared at the small form in the pod. The creature's chest rose and fell with obvious difficulty, and even through the crystalline surface he could see it was struggling. Whatever had happened to this ship, whatever catastrophe had claimed its crew, this little one had somehow survived, but not for much longer. "Can we get it out of there?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "The pod's life support is the only thing keeping it alive, but it's failing fast, maybe another few hours at most. Without understanding their biology or having the right medical equipment, there's nothing we can do." Marcus felt something twist in his chest as he looked down at the dying child. In all his years of salvage work, he'd never encountered anything alive on the derelict ships he explored. Dead civilizations, lost technologies, forgotten treasures, but never a life that could still be saved. This creature was alone in the universe, the last of its kind, dying slowly while he watched. Danny called from across the room, where he was examining the medical equipment. "Boss, I think I found something. There are records here, holographic displays that are still functioning somehow. I can't read the language, but the images are pretty clear. This whole ship, it was some kind of colony vessel. Looks like they were heading to a new world when something went wrong." Marcus walked over to look at the displays Danny had activated. The holograms showed a proud and graceful species, similar to the child in the pod but fully grown. They were tall and elegant with skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. The images showed their civilization, their art, their families, and then the displays showed the disaster, a plague of some kind that swept through the ship. He watched as the population dwindled, as the crew grew smaller and smaller, until finally there was only one adult left, caring for the single child. The final images showed that adult, obviously weakened by disease, placing the child in the medical pod and activating what appeared to be an emergency stasis system. The adult's last act was to program the ship's computers to keep the child alive as long as possible, hoping someone, someday, would find them and know what to do. Marcus stared at the holographic records, his mind racing. The weight of what he was seeing settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't just salvage anymore. This was a life, a child who had been waiting in that pod for 300 years for someone to find them. The ship's automated systems had kept the little one alive all this time, but now they were failing. "Boss," Sarah said quietly, "I've been running more detailed scans. The creature's nervous system is severely damaged. Even if we could stabilize its condition, it would likely never walk again. The lower half of its body shows no neural activity. It's completely paralyzed." Elena looked up from where she was studying the ship's power systems. "The bio-neural networks that run this ship are dying too. That's why everything's failing. This whole vessel was designed to work with living crew members, their nervous systems integrated with the ship's controls. Without that connection, it's slowly shutting down." Danny continued working with the holographic displays, using the ship's translation protocols to begin understanding the alien language. "I'm getting more information about their biology. This species, they called themselves the Valthura. They were explorers, scientists. This ship was carrying about 10,000 colonists to a new world. The plague that killed them, it attacked their nervous systems first. That's probably why the child is paralyzed." Marcus felt his crew looking at him, waiting for orders. The smart thing would be to take what samples they could and leave. The child was dying, and there was nothing they could do about it. Their ship didn't have the medical facilities to help, and they were 3 weeks from the nearest human station. Even if they could somehow keep the creature alive, what kind of life would it have? Paralyzed, alone, the last of its species. But as he looked down at the small figure in the pod, Marcus saw something that made his decision for him. The child's eyes had opened. Large violet eyes that seemed to hold far too much intelligence for such a young face. Those eyes looked directly at him through the crystal surface, and Marcus felt a connection that transcended species barriers. The child was aware, conscious, and afraid. "We're taking it with us," Marcus announced. Sarah spun around, her expression shocked. "Marcus, that's suicide. We don't know anything about its biology, its needs. We can't even communicate with it. And if we remove it from the pod, it'll die within minutes. Then we take the pod too," Marcus replied firmly. "Elena, can you rig our life support to power that medical bay?" Elena studied the alien systems, her engineer's mind already working on the problem. "Maybe. The power requirements are enormous, and I'd have to basically rebuild our entire electrical system. It would take everything we have just to keep that pod running. We'd be flying on minimal power, no backup systems. One malfunction and we all die. Danny, how long until we reach the nearest human station?" 3 weeks minimum, boss, and that's if nothing goes wrong." Marcus looked around at his crew. These people had been with him for years. They trusted him, followed his lead, split the profits of their salvage operations equally. He had no right to ask them to risk their lives for a dying alien child they'd never seen before today. "I can't order you to do this," he said slowly. "This isn't about salvage anymore. If we try to save this kid, we might all die. The smart thing is to walk away, report the find to the authorities, and let them deal with it. But by the time they get here, it'll be too late. Sarah looked at the readings on her scanner again, then at the child in the pod. The paralysis is permanent, Marcus. Even if we save its life, it'll never be able to move normally. It'll need constant care, medical attention we can't provide. I know, Marcus replied. But look at those eyes, Sarah. That's not just an animal in there, that's a person. A scared, dying person who's been alone for 300 years. Elena was already pulling tools from her kit. Well, I've always wanted to see if I could hotwire an alien spaceship. This should be interesting. But Marcus, I need to warn you. If I'm right about how this ship works, connecting our systems to theirs might do more than just power the medical bay. These bioneural networks, they're designed to interface with living minds. There's a chance that once we're connected, the ship might try to connect with us too. Danny looked up from the holographic displays. That might not be a bad thing. I'm finding references to emergency protocols in the ship's memory banks. If the Vilethara detected that their species was dying, they might have programmed the ship to try to preserve their knowledge, their culture, maybe even transfer it to compatible minds. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying the ship might try to download 300 years of alien memories into our brains, their language, their history, their science, everything they were as a people. Sarah shook her head vigorously. That's insane. We don't know what that kind of neural interface could do to human minds. It could kill us, or worse, drive us completely mad. Marcus looked down at the child again. Those violet eyes were still watching him, and now he could see tears forming at the corners. The creature understood somehow that they were debating its fate. It knew it was dying, knew it was alone, and it was afraid. Elena, start the modifications. Danny, keep working on those translation protocols. Sarah, prepare whatever medical supplies we have. We're taking the kid home. Elena nodded grimly and began working on the ship's systems. This is going to take several hours, boss. And once I start connecting our systems to theirs, there's no going back. The power drain will be constant. We'll be running on fumes the whole way home. And if the ship tries to interface with our minds? Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching as Elena began the delicate work of merging human and alien technology. Then I guess we'll learn what it means to be Vilethara. But we're not leaving a child to die alone. Not while we can do something about it. As Elena worked, the ship around them began to change. The bioluminescent veins in the walls grew brighter, and the humming sound that permeated the vessel increased in intensity. It was as if the ship itself was awakening, recognizing that help had finally arrived. In the medical pod, the child's breathing seemed to stabilize slightly. The crystal surface of the pod had cleared completely now, and Marcus could see the creature more clearly. Despite its obvious youth, there was something ancient in its eyes, as if it carried the memory of its entire species. 4 delicate arms, pale skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and those remarkable violet eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. Marcus made a silent promise to that dying child. Whatever it took, however dangerous it might be, he would get it home. He would find a way to help it live, even if that life would be different from what nature had intended. Humanity had always been good at adapting, at finding solutions to impossible problems. Maybe it was time to extend that stubborn refusal to give up to another species entirely. The modification took 8 grueling hours. Helena worked with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb, sweat beading on her forehead as she carefully merged human technology with alien bioneural systems. Every connection had to be perfect. One mistake would either kill the child immediately or overload their ship's systems and strand them in space. Marcus stayed close to the medical pod, talking quietly to the child even though he had no idea if it could understand him. The creature's eyes tracked his movements, and occasionally it would make soft sounds that almost seemed like attempts at communication. Danny had made progress with the translation protocols, but the Vilethara language was incredibly complex, built on emotional resonances and harmonic frequencies that human vocal cords couldn't replicate. Almost there, Elena called out, her voice strained. But Marcus, the power draw is even worse than I calculated. We're going to be running on emergency reserves before we're halfway home. And I'm seeing something else in these bioneural pathways. They're not just designed for basic ship functions. This whole vessel is essentially a living computer, and it's been learning, evolving for 300 years. Sarah looked up from where she was preparing medical supplies. What do you mean, learning? The ship's been running simulations, trying to find ways to save the last survivor. It's run through millions of scenarios, modeling different medical interventions, different technologies it might encounter. It's basically become an expert on keeping that child alive, but it's also become desperate. I think when we connect our systems, it's going to try everything it can to ensure the child's survival. Danny suddenly stepped back from the holographic displays, his face pale. Guys, we need to see this. I've accessed more of their historical records. The Valthera weren't just explorers. They were refugees. Their homeworld was destroyed by something they called the Silent Hunger. From what I can translate, it sounds like some kind of consuming entity that devours entire star systems. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Are you saying there's something out there that eats planets? Maybe. But here's the thing, boss. According to these records, the Valthera had been fighting it for generations. They had weapons, technologies, strategies for dealing with it. And if this ship's computer is right, the Silent Hunger is still out there, still spreading through the galaxy. Elena finished the last connection and stood back, wiping her hands on her coveralls. Well, ready or not, we're committed now. The moment I activate this link, our ship becomes part of their bioneural network. We'll be able to power their medical systems, but we'll also be opening our minds to whatever's left of Valthera consciousness. Marcus looked around at his crew. Last chance to back out. We can still disconnect everything and walk away. Sarah shook her head. I've been monitoring the child's condition. If we don't do this in the next hour, it won't matter anyway. The kid's dying, Marcus. This is its only chance. Danny nodded agreement. Besides, if there really is something like the Silent Hunger out there, maybe we need to know about it. The Valthera fought it for generations. Their knowledge could be crucial for humanity's survival. Elena was already reaching for the activation control. Well, I've always wondered what it would be like to think with an alien mind. Guess we're about to find out. She pressed the control and everything changed. The ship came alive around them with a sudden surge of energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The walls began to pulse with brilliant light, and Marcus could hear what sounded like a symphony of voices speaking in harmonious frequencies. But more than that, he could feel the ship thinking, vast and alien thoughts that touched the edges of his consciousness. Then the connection deepened, and suddenly Marcus wasn't just human anymore. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. He saw the Valthera homeworld as it had been, a planet of crystal spires and floating gardens where beings of light and grace had built a civilization based on harmony with nature. He felt their joy, their love for their families, their wonder at the beauty of the universe. And then he experienced their terror as the Silent Hunger arrived. He saw entire worlds stripped bare, reduced to lifeless husks in a matter of days. The hunger wasn't just a force of destruction. It was intelligent, malevolent, feeding not just on matter and energy, but on hope itself. The Valthera had fought it with weapons that bent space and time. But for every victory, there were a dozen defeats. Through Sarah's gasp, he realized his crew was experiencing the same flood of alien memories. Danny was speaking fluent Valthera, his voice taking on the harmonic qualities of their language. Elena was interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Her consciousness merged with alien technology in ways that should have been impossible. But most importantly, Marcus could sense the child in the medical pod. Not just its physical presence, but its mind, its personality, its desperate loneliness. The child's name was Kethvar, which roughly translated to last song. It had been placed in stasis as an infant, but had somehow remained partially conscious throughout the centuries, aware of its isolation, dreaming of a rescue that might never come. Through the bioneural link, Marcus could communicate directly with Kethvar without words. He projected feelings of safety, of protection, of the promise that the child would not die alone. In return, he felt Kethvar's gratitude, but also its fear. The child knew about the paralysis, knew it would never walk or move normally, and was terrified of being a burden. Marcus sent back emotions of acceptance, of value beyond physical ability, of the worth of every life regardless of limitation. Human concepts, perhaps, but ones that resonated with Valthera philosophy in unexpected ways. The ship's medical systems, now powered by human technology and guided by human determination, began working with new efficiency. The failing stasis pod stabilized, its biosystems reinvigorated by the hybrid technology Elena had created. But more than that, Marcus could feel the ship itself changing, adapting, becoming something new. The bio-neural networks were incorporating human neural patterns, creating a fusion of two species' ways of thinking. Sarah, her consciousness expanded by Valthara medical knowledge, suddenly understood what was happening to Kethvar's body. The paralysis wasn't just damage from the plague. It was a side effect of the extended stasis. The child's nervous system had never fully developed, remaining in an infantile state even as its mind matured. But with the right intervention, with a combination of human medical techniques and Valthara biotechnology, there might be hope for recovery. Marcus, she said, her voice taking on some of the harmonic qualities of Valthara's speech. I think I know how to help it. But we'll need to get to a major medical facility, and we'll need to bring some of this bio-neural technology with us. The child will need a permanent interface with cybernetic systems to compensate for the nerve damage. Elena, still merged with the ship's consciousness, was already working on a solution. I can adapt some of the ship's bio-neural components into a portable medical unit, but it'll mean taking part of the ship's consciousness with us. This vessel will never be the same. Through their shared connection with Kethvar, they all felt the child's response to this news. Not fear of the cybernetic interface, but relief that there might be a future beyond the medical pod. The Valthara had always been comfortable with biotechnological integration. To them, the boundaries between organic and artificial were meaningless. What mattered was consciousness, thought, the ability to experience wonder and joy. Danny, accessing the ship's vast databanks, made another discovery. There are other colony ships out there scattered across the galaxy. Most are probably dead, but some might still have survivors. And boss, the Valthara had mapped the expansion of the Silent Hunger. If their data is accurate, it's heading toward human space. We might have a few decades at most before it reaches our worlds. Marcus felt the weight of this knowledge, shared now with an entire alien consciousness. Humanity had stumbled into something much larger than a simple rescue mission. They had become the inheritors of an ancient war, guardians of knowledge that might be crucial for the survival of all intelligent life in the galaxy. But looking down at Kethvar, still fragile but now stable in its medical pod, Marcus knew they had made the right choice. Sometimes the most important battles began with a single act of compassion, a refusal to let an innocent life slip away into darkness. The child would live, would have a chance to experience the universe beyond its crystal prison, would carry the legacy of the Valthara into a future none of them could imagine. The journey back to human space became a nightmare of failing systems and impossible choices. Elena's dire predictions about power consumption proved optimistic. The bio-neural link that kept Kethvar alive drew so much energy that they had to shut down life support in half the ship, crowding the entire crew into the bridge and sleeping in shifts to conserve oxygen. But the real challenge wasn't the power drain. It was the constant presence of alien thoughts in their minds. The Valthara consciousness embedded in their ship's systems didn't just provide memories and knowledge. It was actively trying to preserve itself, to ensure the survival of everything the Valthara had ever been. Sometimes Marcus would wake up speaking in harmonic frequencies or find himself instinctively reaching for controls that operated on thought rather than touch. Sarah had it worst. Her medical training made her the natural interface for the biomedical systems, and the Valthara medical knowledge was vast and complex. She began experiencing the equivalent of decades of alien medical training compressed into hours, her mind struggling to process treatment methods that required understanding of biology on a molecular level. The child's condition is stabilizing, she reported on the 10th day, though her voice carried the harmonic undertones that marked deep bio-neural interface. But Marcus, I'm seeing things in these scans that human medicine never could have detected. Kethvar isn't just paralyzed from the plague. The stasis system was designed to halt development at a specific point. The child has been kept in a state of suspended biological growth for 3 centuries. Danny looked up from where he was managing the ship's increasingly erratic navigation systems. What does that mean exactly? It means that physically Kethvar is still an infant, even though its mind has had 300 years to develop. The paralysis might be reversible if we can restart its natural development cycle, but it would need to essentially grow up all over again. And with cybernetic assistance, it might be able to compensate for the nerve damage. Elena, who had barely left the engineering station in days, spoke without looking away from the jury-rigged systems. The bioneural components I've isolated can be configured as a portable medical unit, but it'll require constant monitoring. The child will need to learn to interface with the system consciously. It's not just medical equipment, it's a symbiotic relationship. Marcus spent hours each day sitting beside Kethvar's medical pod, using the bioneural link to communicate directly with the child's mind. What he found there was remarkable. Despite centuries of isolation, Kethvar had retained a sense of wonder about the universe that was purely childlike. The child asked endless questions about humanity, about Earth, about what it would be like to have friends and see new places. But Kethvar also carried the weight of being the last Velthara. Through the bioneural link, Marcus could feel the child's deep sense of responsibility to preserve and honor the memory of its people. It was a burden no child should have to carry, yet Kethvar bore it with a grace that humbled the hardened salvage captain. On the 15th day, their navigation computer finally gave up completely, overwhelmed by the conflicting demands of human and alien systems. Danny managed to rig a backup using parts of the Velthara ship's bioneural network, but the result was a navigation system that thought in patterns no human mind could fully comprehend. "Boss, I'm not even sure where we are anymore," Danny admitted, exhaustion evident in his voice. "This hybrid nav system is following routes through space that don't match any human star charts. It's like the Velthara map dimensions we can't even perceive." Elena looked up from her work, her eyes reflecting the same bioluminescent glow that ran through the alien ship's corridors. "Maybe that's not a bad thing. I've been analyzing the power flow patterns in their technology, and I think I know why their ships were so much more efficient than ours. They weren't just traveling through normal space. They were using biological quantum fields to take shortcuts through dimensions that exist parallel to our own." Sarah joined the conversation from her station monitoring Kethvar. That would explain how they escaped the silent hunger for so long. If they could travel through space that the hunger couldn't access, they could stay ahead of it indefinitely. At least until the plague struck. Through the bioneural link, Marcus felt a pulse of recognition from Kethvar. The child was trying to communicate something important about their course, but the concepts were too complex for direct translation. Marcus opened his mind more fully to the alien consciousness, letting Velthara knowledge flow through him. Suddenly he understood. They weren't lost. The navigation system was taking them exactly where they needed to go, using routes that the Velthara had mapped centuries ago. But their destination wasn't the human space station Marcus had programmed into the computer. They were heading for something else entirely. "There's a Velthara research station," Marcus announced, the knowledge flowing through the bioneural link, hidden in a pocket dimension near the edge of human space. It was designed as a fallback position, a place where survivors could regroup if their home world fell. It might still be operational. Elena's eyes widened. "A functional Velthara facility? The technology we could recover there would revolutionize everything. Medicine, space travel, weapon systems that could defend against the silent hunger." "More than that," Sarah added, monitoring Kethvar's responses through the medical sensors. "A Velthara medical facility would have the equipment to properly treat the child's condition. We could restart its development cycle safely, give it a real chance at a normal life." Danny was already adjusting their course to match the destination the bioneural navigation system had calculated. "How long until we reach the station?" Marcus consulted the alien knowledge flowing through his mind. 3 days. But there's something else. The station's automated systems will recognize Kethvar as legitimate Velthara. They'll respond to the child's presence, activate systems that have been dormant for centuries. But they might also trigger defense protocols if they detect unknown life forms. "You mean us?" Helena said grimly. "Yeah. We need to be prepared for the possibility that the station might see us as a threat to the last Velthara. The automated systems were designed to protect survivors at all costs." Through the bioneural link, Kethvar communicated a complex series of harmonic frequencies that Marcus felt rather than heard. The child was offering to vouch for them, to use its genetic authorization to grant the humans access to Velthara facilities. But more than that, Kethvar was proposing something unprecedented: formal adoption of the human crew as honorary Velthara. "It's not just about access to the station," Marcus explained to his crew. "Kethvar wants to make us family. In Velthara culture, that would give us the right to inherit their knowledge, their technology, their responsibility to fight the silent hunger. But it would also mean we could never go back to being purely human. The bioneural integration would be permanent. Sarah looked at the readings from her medical scanner, then at the child in the pod. I've been monitoring the changes in our brain chemistry since we linked with their systems. The integration is already happening whether we want it or not. We're becoming something new, a hybrid of human and Velthara consciousness. Elena nodded agreement. Our ship's systems are already more Velthara than human. I can control them with thought alone now, and I understand their technology on an intuitive level that shouldn't be possible. We've already crossed the line. Danny was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. So we're not just rescuing an alien kid anymore. We're becoming the bridge between two species, the first human Velthara family in the universe. Marcus looked down at Kethvar, feeling the child's hope and trust through their neural connection. Are we ready for that responsibility? To become guardians not just of one life but of an entire civilization's legacy? Through the bioneural link, he felt his crew's unanimous agreement. They had started this journey as salvage operators looking for profit. They were ending it as something entirely new. The first representatives of a hybrid species that might be the galaxy's only hope against an ancient and terrible enemy. As their ship continued toward the hidden Velthara research station, Marcus realized that saving one paralyzed alien child had changed everything. They were no longer just humans. They were something more, something that carried the best of both species and the promise of a future none of them could have imagined. The Velthara research station materialized around them like a dream becoming reality. One moment they were flying through empty space. The next they were inside a vast crystalline structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal dimensions. The walls curved in impossible directions, and Marcus could see stars through surfaces that should have been solid, as if the station existed in multiple realities simultaneously. How is this even possible? Elena whispered, her enhanced consciousness struggling to process the station's architecture. Through the bioneural link, she could feel the explanation flowing from Kethavar's mind, but the concepts were almost too advanced for human understanding. The station's automated systems activated the moment they detected Kethavar's life signs. Gentle harmonics filled the air as ancient computers awakened, and the docking bay that opened to receive them was clearly designed for Velthara physiology. The rust bucket looked crude and primitive, floating in the elegant bioluminescent chamber. As they prepared to disembark with Kethavar's medical pod, defense protocols activated. Massive biomechanical guardians emerged from the station's walls, their crystalline forms towering over the human ship. These weren't simple robots, but conscious entities grown from the same bioneural technology that powered Velthara ships. They had been waiting for centuries, programmed to protect the station and any survivors who might find their way there. Through the bioneural link, Marcus felt Kethavar's response to the Guardians. The child wasn't afraid, it was relieved. These artificial beings had been its people's last gift to the future, repositories of knowledge and guardians of hope. But they were also dangerous, capable of destroying any threat to Velthara interests with weapons that operated on principles human science barely understood. Kethavar transmitted a series of complex harmonic frequencies, identifying itself and vouching for the humans. The Guardians paused, their crystalline forms analyzing the unprecedented situation. They had been programmed to protect the last Velthara, but they had never encountered humans integrated with bioneural technology. The child was obviously the highest priority, but the hybrid nature of Marcus's crew created a logical paradox their ancient programming couldn't easily resolve. Sarah monitored Kethavar's condition as they prepared to transfer the medical pod to the station. The child's biosigns are getting stronger just being here. I think the station's bioneural field is having a positive effect on its development. But Marcus, I'm seeing something else. The medical pod wasn't designed to be a permanent solution. It was always meant to be temporary, until the child could be transferred to a proper Velthara medical facility. Danny was scanning the station's massive databanks through his enhanced neural connection. Boss, the amount of information stored here is incredible. Scientific databases, cultural archives, military tactical data about the silent hunger. But it's all locked behind security protocols that require genetic authorization from surviving Velthara. Elena studied the station's power systems, marveling at technology that made their own seem like stone tools. The whole structure is powered by controlled quantum fluctuations. They're literally drawing energy from the fabric of space-time itself. No wonder they could hide a station in a pocket dimension. The Guardians finally reached a decision. One of the massive crystalline beings approached the medical pod containing Kethvar, its form shifting and flowing as it established a direct bio-neural connection with the child. Through their shared link with Kethvar, Marcus and his crew felt the Guardian's ancient consciousness, patient and protective but also deeply sorrowful. It had waited 3 centuries for a Valthara to return, watching over empty halls and dormant systems, hoping against hope that its people had not truly died out completely. The Guardian communicated directly with Kethvar in frequencies too complex for human understanding, but Marcus caught fragments through the neural link. The station was fully operational, its medical facilities intact, its cultural preservation systems ready to begin the long process of rebuilding Valthara civilization. But there was a problem. The station had been designed to support a population of survivors, not a single child. Many of its systems required multiple Valthara to operate, and some of the most crucial technologies could only be activated by adults. Kethvar responded with determination that surprised the ancient Guardian. The child had spent 3 centuries thinking about this moment, planning for the possibility of reaching a Valthara facility. Through the bio-neural link with the humans, it had developed solutions that combined the best of both species' capabilities. The humans could serve as surrogate operators for systems that required adult Valthara, while their technology could bridge gaps where Valthara methods fell short. The Guardian's response was cautious approval, but with conditions. The humans would be granted access to the station, but they would need to undergo a more complete bio-neural integration process. Their current level of connection was adequate for basic cooperation, but operating Valthara technology at full capacity required a deeper merger of consciousness. They would need to become true hybrids, retaining their human core but gaining the harmonic thought patterns and expanded awareness that Valthara technology required. Sarah looked at the implications of what the Guardian was proposing. It's talking about permanently altering our brain chemistry, our neural pathways. We'd still be ourselves, but we'd think differently, perceive reality differently. There's no going back from that level of integration. Marcus felt Kethvar's emotional state through their connection. The child was terrified of being alone again, but also unwilling to force such a drastic change on the humans who had saved it. It was prepared to activate only basic station functions, to live with limited capabilities rather than ask them to sacrifice their humanity. But as Marcus looked around at his crew, he saw something that Kethvar couldn't perceive through the neural link. His people weren't afraid of the change. They were excited by it. Elena's eyes were bright with the possibility of understanding alien engineering principles that could revolutionize human technology. Danny was already accessing data streams that would expand human knowledge by centuries. Sarah was studying medical techniques that could eliminate diseases and extend human lifespans indefinitely. "We didn't just save an alien child," Marcus announced. "We stumbled onto the next step in human evolution. This isn't about losing our humanity, it's about expanding it." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "The bio-neural integration doesn't replace human consciousness, it enhances it. We'd be able to think faster, understand more complex relationships, interface directly with technology that responds to thought. We'd become what humans might naturally evolve into given a few million more years." Danny was already interfacing with the station's cultural databases, and the knowledge we'd gain access to. Art, music, science, philosophy from a civilization that had millions of years to develop. We'd be bringing that back to humanity, sharing it with our entire species. Sarah looked at Kethvar through the crystal surface of the medical pod. More than that, we'd be giving this child a family. Real siblings who chose to share its heritage, who wanted to help preserve everything the Valthara created. Through the bio-neural link, Marcus felt Kethvar's overwhelming gratitude and joy. The child had been prepared to face a lonely existence as the last of its kind, but now it would have family, purpose, and the means to honor its people's legacy while building something entirely new. The Guardian extended crystalline appendages toward each of the humans, ready to begin the deeper integration process. This wasn't just about accessing alien technology anymore. It was about creating a new form of consciousness that combined the best traits of both species. Human adaptability and determination merged with Valthara wisdom, and technical sophistication. As Marcus allowed the Guardian to establish the enhanced bio-neural connection, he felt his awareness expand exponentially. Suddenly he could perceive dimensions of reality that human senses couldn't detect, understand mathematical relationships that describe the fundamental structure of the universe. But most importantly, he could feel Kethvar's presence not as an alien consciousness sharing space in his mind, but as genuine family, an adopted sibling whose thoughts and emotions were as real and important as his own. The integration was transformative, but not destructive. Marcus was still himself, still human at his core, but now he was also something more. He was the first of a new species, a bridge between two civilizations, and the guardian of knowledge that might determine the fate of all intelligent life in the galaxy. The medical bay of the Valthara research station was unlike anything human science could have imagined. Living walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that responded to thought and emotion, while treatment pods grew from the floor like crystalline flowers. Sarah, now enhanced by Valthara medical knowledge, worked with the station's biomedical systems to begin the delicate process of restoring Kethvar's stunted development. The procedure will take several months, she explained to Marcus and the others, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked deep bio-neural integration. We need to carefully restart the child's biological growth while maintaining the neural pathways that have developed over 3 centuries. It's like performing surgery on someone's entire life history. Kethvar lay in the specialized medical pod, no longer the primitive emergency stasis unit from the derelict ship, but a sophisticated biomedical environment that could nurture healthy development. Through their enhanced neural link, Marcus could feel the child's mixture of hope and anxiety. After 300 years of paralysis, the possibility of movement seemed almost too wonderful to believe. Elena had thrown herself into studying the station's engineering systems with the passion of someone discovering a new form of art. The quantum, dimensional technology is incredible, she reported, her consciousness directly interfaced with the station's power grid. They're not just hiding the station in a pocket dimension, they're creating stable micro-universes where physical laws can be modified. We could build entire civilizations in spaces that exist outside normal reality. Danny had become the station's living archive. His mind merged with cultural databases that contained the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of Valthara civilization. I'm finding references to other survivor stations, other groups that escaped the silent hunger. Most are probably dead by now, but there might be other children in stasis, other last survivors waiting for rescue. The guardian entity that had first greeted them had become their guide and teacher, its ancient consciousness patient with their questions and amazed by their adaptability. In all our projections for species contact, it communicated through harmonic frequencies that bypassed language entirely. We never anticipated beings who could integrate so completely with our bio-neural systems while maintaining their own cultural identity. Humans possess a flexibility of thought that makes you natural bridge builders between different forms of consciousness. As the weeks passed, Marcus watched his crew transform in ways both subtle and profound. They were still recognizably themselves, but enhanced, expanded, capable of perceiving reality in dimensions that pure humans couldn't access. More importantly, they had become a family in the truest sense, bound together not just by shared experience but by the bio-neural connections that allowed them to share thoughts and emotions directly. Kethvar began to show signs of physical development for the first time in centuries. The medical pod carefully stimulated growth in the child's paralyzed limbs, while biomechanical interfaces were grown to supplement damaged neural pathways. It wasn't a cure in the traditional sense, but a fusion of biological and artificial systems that would allow the child to experience full mobility. Look at this, Sarah called excitedly, monitoring the child's progress. The biomechanical neural interfaces aren't just replacing damaged tissue, they're creating new pathways that never existed in normal Valthara physiology. Kethvar is going to be stronger and more capable than any natural Valthara ever was. Through their neural link, Marcus felt Kethvar's wonder as the child began to experience sensations from limbs that had been numb for centuries. The biomechanical interfaces translated neural signals into movement, but they also enhanced natural capabilities. The child would eventually be able to interface directly with technology, to think at accelerated speeds, to perceive environmental data that biological senses couldn't detect. Elena made a breakthrough in understanding the station's dimensional manipulation technology. I think I know how to modify our ship's engines to use Velthera space-folding techniques. We could travel between star systems in days instead of months, and more importantly, we could travel through dimensions that the silent hunger can't access. The implications were staggering. If they could teach humanity to build ships using Velthera dimensional technology, human civilization could expand into hidden spaces where they would be safe from the approaching threat. But more than that, they could begin searching for other survivor stations, other children who might still be waiting for rescue. Danny discovered something even more significant in the cultural archives. The Velthara weren't the only species that fought the silent hunger. There were alliances, coalitions of different civilizations working together to develop countermeasures. Most of the participant species are extinct now, but their combined research is all stored here. The station's databases contained military strategies, weapon designs, and defensive technologies developed by dozens of different species over millions of years. It was a comprehensive guide to fighting an enemy that devoured entire star systems, compiled by civilizations that had paid for that knowledge with their lives. But the most important discovery came from Kethvar itself. As the child's development progressed and its biomechanical interfaces came online, it began accessing genetic memories that had been locked away since birth. The Velthera had evolved a form of hereditary memory storage, allowing crucial knowledge to be passed from generation to generation through biological inheritance. The locations Kethvar communicated through harmonics that resonated with joy and determination. I remember the locations of the research stations, the hidden colonies, the emergency caches. Not all of my people are dead. There are others scattered across the galaxy waiting. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. They had saved one alien child and inadvertently become the inheritors of an ancient war, but they had also gained something precious, the knowledge and tools to fight back and the beginning of a new form of consciousness that could bridge the gaps between species. "So what's our next move?" he asked, looking around at his transformed crew, his adopted alien sibling, and the ancient guardian that had become their mentor. Elena spoke first, her consciousness already interfacing with the station's engineering systems. "We upgrade our ship with Velthera technology, give it dimensional capability, bioneural control systems, and defensive weapons based on the anti-hunger research." Sarah nodded agreement from her position monitoring Kethvar's medical progress. "And we start planning rescue missions. If there are other survivors out there, other children in failing stasis systems, we need to find them before it's too late." Danny looked up from the cultural archives, his eyes reflecting the same bioluminescent glow that ran through the station's corridors. "We also need to start preparing humanity for what's coming. The silent hunger is still out there, still spreading. Our species needs to know about the threat and start developing defenses." Through their shared bioneural connection, Marcus felt Kethavar's agreement and determination. The child was no longer just a survivor but a leader, the keeper of genetic memories that spanned millions of years and the bridge between a lost civilization and a species that might be the galaxy's last hope. As Marcus looked out through the station's dimensional, viewing ports at stars that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, he realized that their journey was just beginning. They had started as salvage operators and become something entirely new. The first family of a hybrid species, guardians of ancient wisdom, and quite possibly the galaxy's last line of defense against an enemy that had already consumed most of the universe. But for the first time since they had found that derelict ship, Marcus felt hope. They weren't alone in the fight anymore, and they weren't purely human anymore. They were something better. Something that combined the best of both species, and they had the knowledge and tools to build a future that neither species could have achieved alone. 2 years after finding Kethvar, Marcus stood on the observation deck of their transformed vessel, watching as the first human Velthara hybrid colony took shape in the hidden dimensional space they had created. What had begun as a desperate rescue mission had evolved into something far greater. The birth of a new civilization that combined the ingenuity of humanity with the ancient wisdom of the Velthara. The colony ship Phoenix Rising bore little resemblance to the old Rust Bucket. Elena's integration of Velthara bioneural technology had created something unprecedented, a vessel that was part machine, part living organism, and entirely revolutionary. Its crystalline hull could shift between dimensions at will, making it invisible to conventional sensors and completely undetectable by the Silent Hunger's scouts. Kethvar had grown remarkably during their time at the research station. Now physically equivalent to a 10-year-old human, the child moved with fluid grace using biomechanical limbs that were stronger and more precise than natural tissue. But more importantly, Kethvar had become the emotional heart of their growing community, a bridge between species who helped other rescued survivors adapt to their new hybrid existence. They had found 17 other Velthara survivors during their search missions, most of them children who had been placed in emergency stasis as their ships failed. Each rescue had been a race against time, failing life support systems pushed beyond their limits. But each success had added to their growing family of hybrid consciousness. Sarah had become something resembling a mother to the rescued children, using her enhanced medical knowledge to help them adapt to biomechanical enhancement while maintaining their unique Velthara heritage. The integration process is becoming more refined with each rescue, she reported during their weekly family meetings. The new arrivals are adapting faster, and their biomechanical systems are more sophisticated than anything we achieved with Kethvar. Elena had taken on the role of chief engineer for their expanding fleet, teaching human crews how to operate vessels that responded to thought rather than manual control. "We've completed 5 more ships with full dimensional capability," she announced. "Each one can carry a search team to different galactic sectors. We're going to find every survivor out there." Danny had become their cultural preservationist and intelligence coordinator. His consciousness was permanently linked to the vast databases they had recovered, making him a living repository of millions of years of accumulated knowledge. "I've identified 43 more potential survivor sites," he reported. "But I've also found something else. The Silent Hunger has accelerated its expansion pattern. It's moving faster than the Velthara predicted." Marcus felt a chill through the bio-neural connection as he processed this information. "How much time do we have?" "Based on current expansion rates, the Hunger will reach the outer edge of human space in approximately 15 years. But that assumes it maintains current speed. If it encounters significant resistance and decides to accelerate further, we could have as little as 8 years." Through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt the mixed emotions of his extended family. Fear of the approaching threat, but also determination and hope. They weren't the same desperate refugees who had fled the Hunger centuries ago. They were something new, something that combined human adaptability with Velthara technology, and they had advantages that no previous civilization had possessed. Kethvar spoke up, their voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked deep bio-neural integration. "The research stations contain weapon designs that were never tested, defensive technologies that require the combined knowledge of multiple species to implement. We have something the original Velthara never had, the perspective of a young species that hasn't learned what's supposedly impossible." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "The humans I've been training are adapting to bio-neural technology faster than anyone expected. They don't have preconceptions about how things should work, so they're finding applications that never occurred to the original designers." Sarah had been monitoring the psychological health of their growing community, both human and Velthara. "The children are showing remarkable resilience. They're not just adapting to biomechanical enhancement, they're thriving, and they're developing abilities that neither species possessed independently." Marcus walked through the colony ship's living corridors, marveling at how the bio-neural technology had evolved under human influence. The walls responded to the emotions of the people walking through them, shifting color and pattern to provide psychological comfort. Children, both human and Velthara, played in spaces that reconfigured themselves to match their imagination, while adults worked with technology that anticipated their needs and adapted to their thinking patterns. In the colony's central plaza, a space that existed partially in normal dimensions and partially in the hidden realm they had created, Marcus found the monument they had built to commemorate the lost civilizations that had fought the Silent Hunger. It was a beautiful crystalline structure that contained the preserved memories of dozens of extinct species, their knowledge and cultural heritage maintained in bio-neural storage systems that would last for millions of years. Kethvar joined him at the monument, moving with the fluid grace that the biomechanical limbs provided. "Sometimes I dream about the others," the child said quietly. "The Velthara who didn't make it to the stasis pods, the children who died when their ships failed. But I also dream about the future, about all the species we might save from the hunger." Marcus felt the depth of emotion behind those words through their neural connection. Kethvar carried the genetic memories of an entire civilization, but also the hope and optimism that came from being raised by humans who refused to accept defeat. The child was becoming a leader in ways that transcended species boundaries, someone who could inspire both human determination and Velthara wisdom. "The preliminary reports from our advanced scouts are encouraging," Danny announced, joining them at the monument. "We've made contact with 3 civilizations in the Hunger's path. They're willing to listen to our warnings, and 2 of them have already begun implementing some of our defensive strategies." Elena appeared beside them, her form shimmering slightly as she transitioned from direct interface with the ship's bio-neural systems back to normal consciousness. "The new weapon designs are showing promise in testing. We might actually have a way to hurt the hunger, to make it retreat instead of just avoiding it." Sarah's voice echoed through the colony's communication system, carrying news that made them all pause. "Marcus, you need to see this. We've just received a signal from Earth, a distress call.
Humanity has encountered something on the outer rim of their territory."
Something that matches the description of Hunger Scouts. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. They had spent 2 years building their community, rescuing survivors, and developing new technologies. But ultimately, their purpose was to serve as guardians, protectors of innocent life against an ancient evil that consumed everything in its path. But as he looked around at his extended family, human and Velthara children playing together while adults worked with technology that bridged the gap between species, Marcus felt a surge of confidence. They weren't the desperate refugees that the original Velthara had been. They were something new, something that combined the best of both civilizations. "Prepare the fleet," he announced through the bio-neural communication system that connected their entire community. "It's time to go home. Time to teach humanity that they're not alone in this fight, and that sometimes the most important battles begin with a single act of compassion." As the Phoenix Rising and its sister ships began transitioning to dimensional travel mode, Marcus took one last look at the colony they had built in hidden space. It would remain here as a sanctuary, a place where survivors could be safe while they fought the larger war. But their real mission was just beginning. They were carrying more than just advanced technology and military strategies back to human space. They were bringing hope, the knowledge that cooperation between species could create something stronger than either could achieve alone. Most importantly, they were proving that sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquest, but from the simple decision to save a single life, even when doing so seemed impossible. The paralyzed alien hatchling that Marcus had found on a derelict ship had become the catalyst for the next stage of intelligent evolution in the galaxy. And as their fleet emerged from dimensional space into normal reality, heading toward Earth with news of both terrible danger and unlimited possibility, Marcus knew that the most unbelievable part of their story was still to come.